Well, hello there, people out in YouTube land. It is I, Willie the Monkey King, the terrific trickster of YouTube, I can't think of another one. That one I was kind of like thinking. So I know it's been a few weeks since I've been last on. I was working on some animation projects, and I've been kind of like just really trying my best, for a scattered brain ADHD, hyperactive ADHD, brain to kind of go and get done. And on Memorial Day, I was spending that with my other of significance, who may or may not be in the chat soon. I do not. She may or may not be. She may or not be in the chat later on today. So yeah, there's that. Before I bring on my guest, he is a frequent contributor to Midnight's Edge and Midnight's Edge After Dark. He also is like an actual working screenplay writer. Pardon me. I would love, to introduce you to my audience, to the audience of no one at the moment, the Script Doctor.
Hello,
Script Doctor. How are you?
I am well. How are you doing, Willie?
It is good to have you.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. So okay. I feel free to say this since no one's watching at the moment, but like I wrote like a bunch of questions, and when like some of them I'm very much like, yes, I totally want to do this, but then some of them are kind of like, the flaky kind of ones. And because I know, like, one time I think I said to you, like, I'd love to have you on the show so I can like pick your brain on writing stuff, but then at the same time, who would want to see, like, basically, like, it seems kind of selfish to be like, please critique my story thingies from here, instead of like, so I think what I'm going to do is I'll ask you the flaky questions first.
Okay.
and then it's like, as soon as I drink up enough zero calorie soda liquid courage, I'll ask like the better questions. How about that?
Sure. However you want to do it, I'm game.
Okay. All right. So so correct me if I'm wrong, you are a working in the industry screenwriter, but in Canada, correct?
Well, I'm a Canadian citizen, and right. When I am lucky enough to get jobs in the United States, I then fly down and do the work there. For the past few years, I've had a habit where I fly down to California for the summer months, and I do my hustle where I shop myself around and get whatever work, writing work is available, and then try and see if I can gain enough money and enough work that I can maintain for U.S. residency and then start the immigration process. But a lot of things are shot in Canada, and when I get some jobs, they end up saying, okay, you're going to Canada, and it's like, oh, great. So my residency stuff is kind of cut down, and you have to have more than 50% in the United States before you can apply for residency, and then from there to go up immigration and whatnot. And so it's a little bit tricky. But yes, I do work when I can, when competition is in my favor. It's a very, very cutthroat. Like, people are very nice about it, but it's fierce competition, and I have lost a lot of good jobs to some really, really great writers, and I have no animosity towards that.
Yeah, I know, I understand. Well, okay, so because this is a kind of a fluff question, but I was kind of worried about inadvertently doxing you. How did you get in the biz?
through school, actually.
Okay.
So when I was in school with the screenwriting program, our teachers told us to start sending out inquiry letters to apply for internships, unpaid internships. So I applied everywhere, and there wasn't like a standard application process. You just send out an inquiry email and maybe some samples of your writing, and you follow it through. And what ended up happening, I got really, really lucky. Someone over at Paramount Studios saw my email, forwarded it to the right people. They read my sample stuff, and then they offered me a 6-month internship with unpaid internship at Paramount Studios. So I scavenged together as much money as I could and flew down there and started doing the internship, which is basically like, getting coffee, talking to people, making connections and whatnot. And within the first week, we were told, hey, me and a whole bunch of other writers, we were all told, like, yeah, we're going to be hired by the end of the month and you're going to have jobs. It's no longer going to be an internship. You're going to be paid to work in development and be story analysis analysts and all that type of stuff. We were all excited. And then a few days before that happened, got the announcement that Paramount was splitting up into Viacom and CBS. And so all the internship programs that we had applied for were gone. So we didn't get a job. Some of the people I worked for ended up getting moved around to different departments. Some lost their jobs and everything. So I then started. I was down there. I had enough money for a few more months of rent. So I was just shopping around, using my internship there to try and get other internships. Did some story analyst work or script reader work at various little production companies and whatnot. And you just kind of network and work your way up there, and that's kind of how it's been for a little over 15 years.
I know this is going to sound really stupid, and I just wanted to warn you, is like, at first I was like, well, wait a minute, if you flew down there and you're doing this internship, where were you going to live? I'm like, because you can't live in your car the entire. And then when you're like, oh yeah, I pay for rent, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I was kind of worried. I was kind of worried, like, oh, dude, are you one of those like poor bastards who has to like sleep under your desk in order for and like shower in the not the commissary, shower in the commissary. There you go, shower in the
commissary or in the washroom.
Yeah.
No, didn't get there. No, I found an apartment. It was really expensive, it was like $700, and it was part of a 2-bedroom apartment, but I was sharing it with like 7 other people because that's just what it was like. But it was still obscenely expensive.
So I live in the Bay Area, in San Jose to be more particular, and a lot of times what some tech companies will do is they'll bring in a lot of workers from developing countries who they got the engineering software, coding skills, and that's basically like that's how they roll. They roll like they have like 2 or 3 families in one apartment, because like a studio apartment in this area is like somewhere between $1,500 to like $20,000 to $2,000.
Yeah, rent prices are crazy when you are in states like California. Even where I am in Ontario, I'm in a neighborhood like outside of the greater Toronto area, and rents are very expensive for very little square footage. Yeah, and it's only because they advertise that, hey, you're in close proximity to the provincial capital, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
It's so my wife, or my girlfriend I mentioned earlier, she's from New Zealand, and I went with her to visit like some family friends who live there, and like Auckland is the same deal. It's ridiculously, it's like about as expensive as it is here, and it's because it's like, well, this is the city where we practically do everything, because like Weta is in Wellington, but their industry, if you're not doing work in Australia, you're in Auckland. And so it's like that's how they kind of like justify jacking the prices and stuff. But yeah, it's like it still kind of boggles my mind that in certain places that there's like certain places where it's just as bad, because I've heard so many people go to like, like, oh well, we moved to Oregon because it was cheaper, but Oregon's super expensive. And it's like, but it's still cheaper than the Bay Area, so it seems kind of weird. I have the list right here.
Don't worry
So,
about it. Yeah.
no. I'm gonna ask my next question, but I was like, no, it's right here. Okay. So, what kind of what kind of got you into doing your channel?
Oh, I was I was working for a very small studio in LA, and I we shared offices with some people that worked over at CBS.
Mm-hmm.
And so you hear some murmuring back and forth, and uh, I overheard someone talk about a possible lawsuit of copyright infringement for their Star Trek Discovery show, which I thought was really weird. And we couldn't hear anything else about that, but I did a Google search, and what I ended up finding was a Bounding into Comics was like the only website that had anything about it. It was written by John F. Trent. It's the first time I actually saw Bounding into Comics before, because I didn't do much. My internet stuff was always on research things. I didn't do much social media. I'm still very bad at it. And so I read this article about Anas Abdeen and the whole thing going on there, where he had a video game.
Oh, okay.
And then that cited to Midnight's Edge, and then I went and watched their YouTube video, and I saw all their other videos, which were like really, really good.
Yeah.
The fact, even with some of the stuff that they got on Ghostbusters, I was like, oh man, they're really good, because I heard all of these types of things when I was down here about their productions. And and then I just started reading comments and noticing, like, yeah, people are kind of having a contrary opinion to what I hear being talked around town. And because I was fortunate enough to be going between California and Canada, I was not fully ingratiated into the mentality of the Hollywood studio system. So for years, I'd be pitching stuff and they'd be like, well, how will this play in China? I'm like, well, I mean, I understand the value of their dollars, but should we really be, manipulating our stories to placate a country that doesn't hold any of our values and oppresses some of their people?
Yeah.
It's like, but like I quickly started to learn how to navigate that more diplomatically. But I thought that's kind of weird. These types of questions were talked about, and even when I would come up with stories, just for the fact that I like to come up with them. So I've come up with stories with female leads just because I'm like, hey, this would be an interesting female character to write. I've never seen this in movies, and one thing you want to do when you're writing and also making a film is you want to bring something new to the conversation that you haven't seen before to make
Absolutely.
it stand out.
Yeah.
And so I was getting good traction with the female characters stuff that I was writing, but even I was starting to notice, like, yeah, I'm kind of missing out some of the flaws and the obstacles for them in this. And I'm like, I can't figure out why. So I just started perusing all the channels that are associated with, like, not like directly, but just associated with Midnight's Edge and whatnot. And I start hearing other people and they're making points. I'm like, yeah, they're just talking to me about things I learned in film school. And it's like, yeah, maybe I kind of lost my way on that there. So, and also I got really frustrated. I was at the premiere for Captain Marvel, and I thought, this is god awful. And I ended up recording into my phone a 45-minute rant about Captain Marvel and how I would have done it to make it fit more within the Marvel formula and make her an actually appealing character. And it's a video that I was going to transcribe it and redo it as a video, and I'm still doing that, but I have a lot of new scenes and whatnot, and I want to do visual aids to make it work. So Photoshop has been long doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually what it led me to think of is, like, I should just start teaching myself how I write again. So I decided to make a YouTube channel, mostly just for myself. It's like, okay, I'll take something like, a topic that I like or a subject that I like that I'm seeing frustrations with personally. And I'll start talking about that. And the first one that came to mind was the fact that, like, I'm a big fan of Star Wars. I love R2-D2. He's not my favorite character. Obi-Wan is, but R2-D2 is, like, always has a soft spot in my heart. And I was so disappointed that he was thrown under a tarp for The Force Awakens. And I know exactly why. And it's because J.J. Abrams makes money off of the merchandising for BB-8 because it's his character that he made, and he's at the same type of deal. He does that with everything.
I enjoyed that video, actually. It was I actually really enjoyed. I mean, yeah, I know I've heard the same reasons before, but I did enjoy that movie because I'm actually in the same. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, all right. Your show.
No.
Yeah, I just made a video about that, and then I thought, okay, I'll start like doing little reviews and things. Like, how would I write things? Like, imagine, put the situation. It's like, okay, the studio comes to you. This is the script. They say these are the problems. How would you fix them? Type of stuff. So I started playing around with that. I also learned that there's a lot of. I did a Dark Phoenix review, and then how I'd fix it. And at the time of the recording, I was hearing tons of stuff from my friends saying like, Simon Kingberg was being like, a jerk and whatnot. Turns out those guys were just hearing conjecture. Because I'm like, really? That's like, because I didn't think that was the case. I don't know him, but I've heard like a lot of great stories about him as a writer and as like how he wants to direct. And yeah, so I made a like how I would have done it, and I did a little dig at him. But he's a very responsible guy. If you were to ever see it, which I doubt he would, he'd know I was just being a little cheeky. But then I started thinking like, oh, I'm gonna do some. I'm just having fun with this. I've got the time. Because I was starting it in April, right before I was heading back to California for the summer, and wasn't doing much in the summer. When I came back in September, late September is when I came back once to make sure my apartment was going to be empty because I sublet it.
Okay.
And then I went back to LA to do some things, and then I came back like officially in October. And then I just started doing Batwoman because I'm a big Batman DC Comics fan, and I was actually hoping for this to be a good show because I do know some of the cast members, and I'm familiar with some of the writers that got hired onto the show, so I was expecting some decent quality given the fact that it's a Greg Berlanti production, and then was ultimately disappointed. And then through happenstance, just by like finding people on YouTube and voiding my opinion, venting my opinion, I was just making new friends on here. I made my one of my best friends on here, Drew Taylor, Supreme Heretic, who writes for Bounding into Comics. He introduced me to Tom and John F. Trent and all those people, and I'm forever in his debt for that. And if you're listening, buddy, love you. Can't wait to talk to you about Battlestar on Thursday. And yeah, just kind of went out there, and I was sending messages to Tom Connors Jr. With regards to the Rise of Skywalker because they're doing great reporting on it as well. And I was letting them know like, hey, the only time they have an advertising window for this was during like a big sporting event. So it's either baseball, World Series, which usually gets some pretty decent coverage, but not nearly as much as football. So like keep an eye out for that. So whatever next big sporting event, that's going to be your trailer, and that's when they have to kind of get picture locked down. Which was the case. So they figured out what the story was going to be right when that last trailer, which was apparently the first trailer, also dropped.
Yeah.
And then they were shooting to meet the expectations of that trailer about 2 days before it actually released. And yeah, it was pretty crazy. But that ended up making a good friendship there. And yeah, the rest is history. Even though I'm not a huge YouTuber by any means, nor do I intend that to be the case. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I made some great network friends, and I'm keeping myself held accountable to my own writing standards, which is the best thing I can hope for.
Yeah, I mean, if I go too much in a tangent, feel free to cut me off. But it's no, because like, so one of the things, so I got my degree in animation, and even though I'm currently unemployed right now, I work in the tech industry. I've been trying to develop animating. Well, hopefully one, but probably several animated web series things. And it's like I'm kind of in that same situation as you, because I used to write a few comic books, and I used to write a lot, and I used to write a few comic books. And then when I went to art school, I kind of tried to focus everything I can to be a really good artist. Didn't work, but that's okay. Is the A for effort. And so like I've been trying to retrain myself as well. And I'm kind of curious with you is like, well, okay, there's two questions of what you were saying that really intrigued me. One was just because is it possible when you try to pitch your stories to think, because I know when you write a screenplay, you basically by what you put in, you make the budget. Do you, when you do the pitching, do you also kind of do something along those lines as well?
It's not recommended.
Okay.
Ideally, the adage in Hollywood and especially in other film businesses is write the best script you can, and if it's truly great, people will find the money for it. So don't write with a budget in mind unless you're planning on self-producing it.
Okay.
Uh,
Because that was my next question. Because
yes.
I found myself because with my animated stuff, I am unfortunately having to self-produce, and I end up kind of getting a, like I'll write like a really good outline or pretty good script, and it's like, oh, it's like I look at it and I'm like, trying to animate this is going to be, it's like, this is a good story, but trying to animate this is going to be really, really long and hard. And so
Yep.
I end up having to try and like scale it down. And I was like, my next question was basically scope creep. Like it was basically involving scope creep with that, because I guess you don't. Anyway, I guess you don't have to worry about that when you do the pitches and stuff. Okay. This is a dumb question now that I think about it. Okay, well, here's the question, and let me see if I can reword it to where it's not so stupid.
No, just say it as it is. It's fine. No
Okay,
embarrassment
well,
here.
no, it's not embarrassed. It's not embarrassment. It's kind of like, well, no, stupid. Because like if you were going to sell out or go Hollywood,
Yes.
on a TV series, or what TV series, miniseries, or movie would what would be like that kind of thing to tempt you to go sell out or go Hollywood?
So what would be the specific franchise that would
Well,
make me sell out as to not try and
doesn't
tell the
have to
best
be
story I could?
doesn't have to be franchise. It can be whatever. Like you can be like, I want this obscure 80s movie. I want to do a remake of this. I'd be willing to sell out for this obscure 80s movie.
Well, the fun thing about selling out is that it's just to get your foot solidified, and sure, it'll compromise your integrity with a fan base, but it's not so much about the selling out. It's about, are you going to be continuing to sell out? So, for instance, a guy like J.J. Abrams, he's very much a sellout. He sells out concepts, and then he pretty much phones in the effort of everything else. He'll burn through money just because he can, because he wants that extra dollar value of the movie so that he can convince marketing to pump it up so that they can make their money back on the box office. And then he can just tout saying, yes, I made this movie that made like, $500 million domestically type of thing. So for me, anything, if someone wants to just buy, like I've sold a couple of scripts I've been thankful for. However, selling a script and having a script made, produced, and released is a whole different story. And luckily, I've not been fortunate. Sorry, yes, actually, I would say luckily, I have not been fortunate enough for that because I don't think the script really would have been well translated to film. I think it would have suffered a lot. So that's quite all right. But yeah, if someone were to buy any script I wrote, whether it's an adaptation or original piece, I would take that as far as it could for production, release, and credit, and then from there, just diplomatically balance between what is asked of me as part of like a job, because you want to be responsible to your employer,
Yeah.
but at the same time, how can I also be responsible to the customers as well? So how can I reconcile what a studio is paying me to do versus what I know the fans are looking for, especially of a specific franchise.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if they were to say, "Hey, we're going to make Captain America a woman, and we want to do it this way," I would have to figure out the best way I could accomplish that without it compromising the integrity of the original Captain America.
Right.
And that's how it would be. And unless I'm told like, yes, you have to make Captain America evil, it's like, ugh. Okay, but then I have to find clever ways to throw into the script and also work with the director to convey that that's not the intention of the actual creatives. It's this the goal of the studio, so that the fans can maybe either catch it and see the joke that's being made about that subject matter and enjoy it, as opposed to just being completely revolted by it. Like it's a very difficult balancing act to do,
Right.
and it'll never work out that way. But like that's just the case. It's better to have a job and be able to work and get enough credentials to do your own thing, so that you can actually showcase what you really can do,
Right.
as opposed to just giving up and turning down something that could potentially give you a job and then being stuck on the outskirts a lot longer.
Right.
Because
Okay.
I worked on terrible television shows where I've been called in very last minute to rewrite a couple of lines just because they're not working. And I hate these shows, but you know what? You do it because one, it's money. Two, you've earned some respect and trust with the people there. And three,
Right.
because of that, they'll call you back later, especially if they like the work you do.
Right. No, that makes what's kind of funny was the kind of in what was really intriguing was how you kind of described selling out. Because like another industry in music, I used to be a musician as well. I used to be a lot of things, sadly, but it's like the whole thing with bands performing was there was always this tightrope, especially if you were an underground kind of band, is to you have to try and make enough money to be able to do this for your job, or to be like or to do this for a living, but you also had to like pardon me again. You also had to be careful to straddle that line of not abandoning your, because like usually like the term sellout for music is thrown around so willy-nilly. Some people will believe it's like, oh, it's just because anyone who's successful they'll call sellout, and it's like, no, it's not necessarily true. It's just, it's kind of like, are you going to abandon the fans that got you to there in the first place?
Yeah.
And like, are you going to compromise your sound, which is one of the things that help bring those people into your fan base? And it's kind of it's kind of like along the lines of basically being a YouTuber.
I
More,
could
it's
see
kind
that.
of,
Yeah.
or it's like it's like, oh, all of a sudden you pivot to doing unboxing stuff. It's like, well, it's like you lose the loyalty of the fans that help get you to the bigger, to get to where you can be monetized, or for example, or get you to be big enough where you can do sponsorships.
Oh, I can understand that. I mean, on the script writing side of things, let's do a hypothetical here. So
Sure.
I've been reviewing and criticizing Batwoman. Let's say
Yeah.
that Greg Berlanti sees my videos and agrees with my points and he decides to hire me. Well, I would know right off the bat that even if I'm brought into that writer's room, I am going to have zero power or influence over the direction of the show or how those scripts are going to be written. Doesn't even matter what I write. It's going to go to the showrunner's assistant and then the showrunner for whatever rewrites they want to do. In which case, from the fan's perspective, I would be a sellout. Yet it's just the nature of the game where it's like there's nothing I can do about it. And on top of that too, there'd probably be a stipulation in my contract that I couldn't criticize the show. So, and that's if they found out who I really was. So there, I would already be like, I'd have to say, listen, this is what's happening. I'm working for Batwoman. I'm no longer allowed to criticize it. I'm going to do the best I can with what we have. But if you don't see any change in the show, just know that I'm trying on my end, and the system itself with how a show is run is not something that a staff writer can change on their own. So, and that's just the way it is. But I would rather be able to work on it, see the workings of what's going on in the writer's room more, understand it. I'd definitely be voicing my opinions when they make stupid choices, like saying just because a girl is gay doesn't mean she can't be held accountable for actual crimes against people.
Right.
And I would say, like, it's great, like, let's make her sympathetic, but let's either not make the crime she's doing very, very harsh so you can justify, like, public
Like breaking and
volunteers.
entering.
Yeah, something where I understand that makes community service applicable to the crime, as opposed to nearly destroying a subway car with people on it, which would give you minimum of 25 years in jail, in prison. Sorry.
No. Exactly. I'll be honest. I'm very much with you, because I've seen other shows do kind of similar type stuff like that, and I often kind of wonder, wait a minute, like that. That's actually part of my that. Yeah, I'm gonna go in.
Go for it.
I will. That was my my. I really dislike the Christian Bale Batman.
That's fine. I don't think he's that great either.
No. Well, see, so here's the thing. So, because I was explaining it, because like, my favorite live action Batman is Michael Keaton, but because of like they were recasting in that world, George Clooney and Val Kilmer were working off of the foundation that Michael Keaton started. So in essence, their take on Batman is not separate. It's basically built. It's only building off of what they do. So if you're going to count it, in a way they're not. In a way, if you're going to measure their portrayal of Batman, you have to also kind of measure it to, kind of compare it to the foundation before with Michael Keaton.
I understand that. Yep.
And it's like, and I love the Ben Affleck Batman. And it's like, and then that's why I don't think he's the worst Batman. But like Christian Bale one, like a lot of the like one of the things I always got really annoyed at was the whole it's like one of the biggest plot holes to me in Dark Knight, which got on my nerves because fans seem to ignore it entirely, was the fact is that he had no problem committing manslaughter to kill Ra's al Ghul by blowing up the track and letting the train fall and explode.
Yes.
But he has trouble letting the Joker fall to his death after he killed so many cops, did so many killed the woman he was interested in, and did all this stuff.
Yep.
And it's like, to be honest, it's like, but he is willing to kill, Harvey Dent by defenestration. So it's kind of like,
yes,
it's like, that was like that. And like the death toll that Harvey Dent did, like, those were the two biggest plot holes where I'm looking at it and I'm like, this completely falls apart. This movie is not the Citizen Kane of superhero movies. Thank you very much. Come again.
Well, you bring up a great point, which is the inconsistency of character that is written in Batman. And one thing to note is that Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy is really just James Bond in a Batman costume. That's
really James. See,
take a look at it. You've got Morgan Freeman as your Q. You've got Alfred is kind of like your Felix Leiter and your M in one, and then you got the Bond girl, which would be like the Rachel Dawes character, and then whatever villain he's got at the time doing like a mass destruction type of thing on Gotham. It's very much into that. Sorry, it's just very much into that type of formula. And also, Christopher Nolan would kill to direct a James Bond movie, but they'll probably never give it to him.
Really? That's interesting. Oh, because you know why? Because you'd have enough pull, he would want to do something kind of fresh.
Well, his favorite Bond film is On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where if you watch that, you can see a lot of that movie influencing The Dark Knight and even Inception.
Okay, I have seen it. I didn't think it. I gotta see it in that context now. But Bernie, is it? I see your point to a degree but I disagree with you with Alfred being kind of Felix Leiter. I think that would actually be James Gordon.
That also could be the case too, yeah.
Because it's kind of like, well, we're sort of working, we're on the same side, but we're not really friends, but we're sort of are friends. But no, I see your point. Well, like what's funny is like a lot of times, like Dark Knight, especially Dark Knight, and especially Dark Knight Rises. He was influenced apparently by Tales of Two Cities, A Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities and Heat.
Okay, I didn't know, but okay. Oh yeah, I knew. Oh yeah, that's right. Because that's why they got what's his name, William Faulkner, as the bank manager, because he was the bank manager in Heat. I forget his. I don't know if it's Faulkner, but he was the dude who was supposed to play Shredder in the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
He's yeah, I know.
Forget his name.
I can't, it's Finchner.
Yeah, there you go, Fichtner.
Yeah, he was in Contact. He's a great character actor. He's really good. I was disappointed we didn't see more of him in The Dark Knight.
he plays a real he plays a really good asshole. It's like even like it's just I know it's kind of weird to say, but it's like that's a shtick. And it's kind of sad that you don't see him I don't see him in too many stuff and too many
he's doing a TV show right now, so that takes up a lot of his time. He's in Mom, a Chuck Lorre film, a Chuck Lorre television show. He's Mom.
Okay.
He's in Mom. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's a television show is pretty demanding.
Yeah. It's pretty much an 8-day turnaround, right, for each episode.
Well, not for not for half hour. For an hour, it is about an 8 to 9 days. For half hour, it's like 2 to 3, because they shoot in front. Sometimes they shoot in front of a live audience. Sometimes they don't, and they shoot as much as they can on that set with costume changes and whatnot, and then they all out of continuity, and then they come back and do their own stuff. Some shows do shoot within continuity for a live studio audience.
Yeah, they shoot like a full day. Play.
Yeah, those are like a full day thing.
Right.
They're also fun, but they do get tiresome. Also, to your point with regards to The Dark Knight, the one thing, as much as I enjoyed the performance by Heath Ledger, basically being unrecognizable as Heath Ledger, the things that the Joker does, I don't see beyond the capabilities of a normal mob. Like the one thing that made the Joker really interesting is the fact that he pulled off crimes and capers that are beyond what organized crime would do, because it's either too risky or it's too complicated.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of like poisoning the Gotham water supply, or killing or telling the cops you're going to kill someone and then do it. And that's like clever, and they kind of do a little bit of that in The Dark Knight. But the interesting thing is they tell us that the Joker is committing all these crimes, but in the instances where we see some of those crimes being committed, it's done by members of the mob. So, for instance, they kill the judge by blowing up her car. Well, that's two cops doing that. That's not the Joker. They're putting the Joker cards in there, but and they may have been following his orders. But it's I mean, the mob can do that. We've seen the mob do that in other movies.
In real life, fuck.
The whole switching a cop's alcohol with a poison. Again, the mob can do that. Nothing big.
Yeah.
Now the two fairies pitted against each other, that's very Jokerish. It's also very Two-Face-ish. It's like that's kind of like your baseline for the Joker. It's you got to do something that looks like it's a no-win scenario for Batman. And a lot of these things are just kind of make Batman look more incompetent than an actual game of wits. Like, Joker having a bazooka and shooting at the Batmobile, okay. I mean, you're getting closer, but it's not really the thing. And then the other part too is Joker saying that he's not insane. The whole brilliance of the Joker character, especially once you get over the 60s and into the 70s, is the fact that the Joker claims he's insane because he knows he can manipulate the justice system as a result. Exactly. He's actually a very, very sane character. Everything he does is very methodical.
Yeah.
Very particularly done with a purpose. It's exploiting chaos for his own personal gain of either money or power or what have you. Yeah. He doesn't do things random. And if you forget that with the Joker, which is what has happened since the Dark Knight release, especially in the comic books and other iterations, you then lose what makes the character truly dangerous. Because if he's just an agent of chaos, does things random all the time, then there's no method to the madness, and it's less fun because he's no longer a three-dimensional character. He's just whatever the writer feels is interesting at that time is what they're going to do.
Right.
Like the
Well,
first Joker story is he's stealing a diamond. Like he just wants
yeah,
the
no,
diamond. It's like that's a
he
great
steals
thing.
it. Yeah, actually, I'm glad you. This is a nice segue. My viewpoint is this with the Joker. Is that Joker works when he's when you either put him in the Professor Moriarty role, or when you put him in the you put him in the more like of a crime boss sort of way,
Well, a
where it's
serial
like
killer would probably work a little bit
well, see, not
more
I
to his
don't.
strengths.
I don't, because like that's one of those things I've always actually hated about the Joker, and especially like, and actually, it actually, I actually doubled down on it after reading like the original appearances of the Joker.
Mhm.
Is that Joker? It's kind of, it's like you said, he's not insane. He exploits chaos for his own personal gain,
Yes.
and so it's like, for example, like Joker's five-way revenge. He's getting revenge on the people who put him in prison. That's a very clean cut.
Very relatable, understandable motivation.
Exactly.
Yes.
But there's this one, I can't for the life of me. It was in the 80s, but it was like this news reporter who was interviewing supervillains for a TV special, and he interviewed the Riddler. And in the end of that one is like the Joker just walks up and injects him with the Joker venom and he's dead.
Mhm.
And to me, it's like that is to me that's just as egregious on a character assassination for the Joker as is in like how recently where they made him like Leatherface, where he cut off his face
Oh
and he put it
yeah.
on as a mask. It's like, what
Scott
the fuck
Snyder
is
doing
this
that.
shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck that. No. Like, and I'll be honest, that's why, like, to me, it's Heath Ledger is a great, like, I always say, I always say this, it's like, he's a great film villain, but he's not a great Joker. And I know a lot of, and then like anytime I say this, everybody brings up Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, and it's like, yeah, okay, you know what? That's fine, but that's just one comic.
Yeah,
Generally,
and Alan Moore doesn't even like that story anymore.
yeah, and I'll be honest. Personally, I hate Alan Moore. Alan Moore's work. I don't. It's very.
So you've read
edgelord.
all of V for Vendetta, huh?
I did not. Okay, I did not read V for Vendetta, but I will tell you this: I read the Green Arrow and Black Canary story. I read Killing Joke. I read Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I read.
You see a lot of running familiar themes in all those books, eh?
I do see. I do. It's very well. So my angst against Alan Moore. Well, I also see quite a few in what's his name?
Frank Miller.
Yes, like
Yeah.
see something in Frank Miller, and it's kind of like he's not my favorite. I don't dislike him, but at the same time, I would feel very uncomfortable around him if I ever met him in real life.
Oh, he's a frail old man. You have no.
I don't care. You might be like, because this is like, it's like my writer's research is going to the bunny ranch. It's like, okay, cool. You do.
Well, no, you know you're reading a Frank Miller story when Thermite shows up 3 or 4 times in a book.
Oh, Thermite and hookers.
Thermite and hookers.
But it's like, yeah, it's like with Alan Moore. I always got mad when writers would act like they're smarter than you. They'd be like,
yeah, like they're telling you something as opposed to presenting a question.
Exactly. And they act like, and you must follow my thing because I am right, because I am the writer, an educated writer. I've hated that. And it's like every time I've read an Alan Moore book, it's like that. And there's like, when I was reading Whatever Happened, the Justice League Unlimited episode.
Oh, well, like what do you
happened,
give to the man of
yeah,
tomorrow?
For the Man Who Has Everything. For the Man Who Has Everything. Yeah, that one. I read that one too. I'm sorry, I got that confused with Whatever Happened to Man of Tomorrow. Sometimes the titles.
Well, that is definitely an Alan Moore book.
Yeah, both of them are. Both of them are.
Yeah, I think the one. What do you give for the Man of Tomorrow is probably the better of his works.
That will yeah, that one's better than Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, because Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow was a what is an Elseworlds, like a what if Superman's identity was exposed. and basically all his villains went after him, but they like Toyman and Prankster killed Jimmy Olsen and put him in a box, and Bizarro's like, "Oh, I must be the complete opposite of you. Oh, Superman dead. Me, Superman lives, so therefore me dead," and he kills himself. And it's like,
Yeah.
but for what do you get for the man who has everything? My problem, I didn't like that. The Justice League Unlimited episode for that one actually did a better job than Alan Moore's one.
Yes.
I actually kind of wept like a baby when he was because simply it's like part of the problem is they put in these stupid I'm funny Jason Todd jokes, and it's like no, just have them shut up. It's better to say, when I was of the viewpoint of better to say nothing than say something stupid. Or say something you're trying to be witty, or trying to say something witty. It's better to just say nothing than to try and be witty or try and be clever, because then most likely you're gonna fall flat in your face.
Yeah, better to stay silent and appear wise than to say something and remove all doubt. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Is that saying? And so. And it's like, and it just said all those stupid things. And the thing about, the thing also too about with how like the premise of the Black Mercy was that, okay, it is going to grant the most realistic version of what your heart desires. And so what your heart desires in Krypton, for Superman, in living in Krypton and living with, I think it was Lana Lang he lived with.
It was a Lana Lang physical presence, but a Lois Lane attitude.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And it's like, but yet he still has a shitty life. It's like, why would you want that for your heart's desire? It's like, how does that make you want to live in the fantasy world? It's like, it's because he's like, oh, his father is like, he has a shitty life with his father. There's protests. There's like Antifa-esque protest everywhere. It's like, why would that be your heart's desire? You'd have to be the biggest masochist in the world to want to live in that environment. You would be searching for the other. You would be searching for the environment where you get to, like, I'm not even a fan of flight, but if I could choose to live in a world where it's like now versus a world where, yeah, it may kind of be like now, but I can fly, I choose the world where I can fucking fly, dude. It's like, that'd be awesome.
I understand that. I think this is actually an interesting subject, because we talked about this when I was in college. When you're doing something of manipulation for a character, like giving them the perfect life, you have to still inject conflict, because the truth being is that a perfect life is a dull life, and a dull life will drive a person mad to create conflict for themselves. So the concept of like the Black Mercy is like, let's give everything that Clark Kent wants. He wants a wife, he wants a child, he wants to know his real parents, and he wants to live on Krypton. But in order to live on a farm as well. But in order to maintain that illusion, you still have to have conflict to make the reality appear real. So we have earthquakes, we have protests, we have Jor-El kind of regretful for having such a prediction that turned out to be wrong. And that is what makes it more real, because in pure fantasy, it's too good to be true. It probably is. But if you have a little bit of conflict that doesn't directly affect you, but you can see it and it's kind of tangible, that will allow you to maintain the illusion. And that's the psychological warfare that you have with a plant such as the Black Mercy. Yeah. Now, you're very correct that the JLA cartoon did it better, because they made it very simple. Like, okay, yeah, they just stuck to the 2 points. Jor-El is embarrassed with his theory of the planet exploding, and there's now earthquakes, which people are really upset about. Keeps it simple, keeps it believable. It's great. In the comic book, they go a little far. But that's just Alan Moore. Yeah.
Well, I mean, because the thing is like, I see your point. The way I always kind of view it is that keeping the mundane, the monotony of a normal life. The way I see that is the conflict. Is like, because like case in point, The Incredibles. We want to look at like that's an excellent point. Is because he's like, Mr. Incredible got what he wanted, a normal life, a wife, kids, but the conflict is kind of like what oh man, I cannot believe I forgot who said this quote because I use it all the time. Oscar Wilde said, "There's two great tragedies in life: not getting what you want and getting what you want."
Yes.
And so it's like, to me, it seems like it's like the adding other conflicts there. It just feeds it just convolutes the premise you're trying to make. Does that make sense?
I see what you're getting at, and to play off your Incredibles reference, which is a great one. So Mr. Incredible's desire, the part of his character, is that he knows he has these powers and he has to help people. When we see him in his office job, he's helping that little old lady who's been denied her claim because that's what he has to do. He has to help people.
Right.
The at-home life, like the suburban type of thing, he doesn't like that. He likes the fact that he has kids, but he is tortured by the fact that they can't do use their superpowers the way he used to be able to because of this new law that came into place. So, and he's always trying to say, like, he's super excited when his son can like run on water, or when his daughter can like put up force fields and whatnot, and how he's hoping one day that his kid Jack is going to have powers but hasn't developed them yet, because that's what makes life worth living for him. Now, conversely, for a character like Superman, one of the most common through lines in all of his, not all of his stories, but in many of his stories, is that he wants a very normal, simple life.
Yeah.
He does. My favorite iteration of Superman is he becomes Superman because he has these powers and he wants to do right by people. My least favorite is when he's told by his dead father that he was sent to Earth to save humanity. Because I'm like, okay, you just robbed Superman the choice of being a hero, and now have compelled him from a voice from beyond the grave to do these things. It's not self-sacrificial. It's basically I'm a slave to my dead father.
No, I agree with you. I'd say so. Well, I disagree with you with the Incredibles one, but I do agree with you with the Superman one. But like with the Incredibles one, it's like, because he says straight up in the first, in the interview, it's like, I just want, to settle down, raise a family, basically not have to like be a superhero every time. It's basically like they map out everything he wants, when they cut to the present time. And so that's why I see it as like the conflict is he gets everything he wants, but he's not satisfied.
No, you actually have nailed it. He speculates in that interview, like, yes, maybe that's what I want. But when you come to it, you realize that that's not who he is. So, right. And then that's the thing that is the great conflict of that movie, is that what he wants and who he is at direct odds with each other. And by the time he starts getting recruited again, he understands exactly who he is and how he can get what he wants, which is basically he wants to be paid to be a superhero, but not have to be in a job where he can't actually help people.
Right. And my thing was my thing with Superman in for the man who has everything is because I agree with you. Superman does work best when it's like he wants to try and do the right thing, but he doesn't want, he doesn't want what makes him different to put him in mortal danger. I think the Lois and Clark best kind of sums it up in like that pilot episode. But it's like, but at the same time, it's like, when he is Superman, there's a part of him, who wants to have a normal life, who wants to have those, those things. But at the same time, to me, it seems like what the best part of For the Man Who Has Everything shows is that what Superman really super is kind of like along the same lines of Parr in The Incredibles. It's like he wants to be a hero. He wants to help. He doesn't want to just sit idly by and just kind of like just ignore things and just live in his little bubble.
Well, I never got the impression that Superman ever wanted to live in a bubble.
Well, I mean, like
even within the
living on a
comic,
farm.
this felt kind of weird because there was a resistance in that character.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, I mean, he was basically living on a farm, which is generally an isolated place, just working on, just doing his farm work, just kind of like just putting his nose to grindstone and doing his farm work and taking care of his kids, etc. He's not going out and like, look, there's a plane up in the sky, man. He's not doing that. It's like he's not actively actively going out to get, to go out to be a hero. He's just doing his thing. He's just being a father. He's just being a farmer.
Well, yeah, I mean that's his perspective.
And that's kind of his own bubble. That's his bubble because he's like he's just all right, maybe not bubble. An example.
Well, he's very content because one of the coolest things about Superman is that his parents are his heroes. So if he wants to be a hero in his eyes, it would be being a good parent, not being Superman. However, the reconciliation of that is he has these powers. The planet that planet Earth saved his life from Krypton's destruction, and so he sort of repays that because he has the ability to. And I think what his heart's desire is mostly the whole reason why he's fallen in love with Lois Lane is because he's found someone he can be with who also loves him for who he is. I mean, it took decades for that to happen, but it happened. And he just wants to be a dad and a husband, and he doesn't need to always reconcile his powers with his life because there's more to living than just being a hero. That's kind of what Superman's doing. Like he's helping people, but he's not doing it for the glory or the fame or anything. He's just doing it because he can, and that's what makes him the hero.
And it's the right
anytime you read a story or see a piece of like television media or film where Superman proclaims himself to be a hero, it's like, no, you're not now. Like you can't call yourself a hero. Heroes don't call themselves heroes. Heroes are like, I'm just a friend helping out, doing what I can.
Friendly
Other
neighborhood
people call
Spider-Man.
them a hero. Yeah.
Right.
Other people call them a hero. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about a character like Superman is that he cherishes the simpler things as opposed to the great feats that he can accomplish.
Right. Well, one of the things I always kind of found, like I have a soft, even though Superman's not my favorite superhero, but I still have a soft spot for him because it's like he works by him being him and setting the mold for a superhero. It's like because he's kind of like the anti hero of antiquity. He's not like Thor, for example, who does heroic things and then will go to a bar and brag about, be like, "Oh, you're sing my glorious thing." He's not going to do that. He's not, it's like, and to be honest, it's like to me, Lex Luthor seems like he is the traditional hero in antiquity.
Yeah, there's the glory and attention that can come with it, and the
exactly.
Yes.
But yeah, it's well. No, I agree with you. I mean, this is a really good conversation. I really love this. Don't get me wrong. This is fun as fuck.
Cool. That's great.
I'm happy about it. So like I'm just trying to think of it's like, actually let me get to the next question let me do the setup for the question. So, okay. While my girlfriend is not much of a superhero-y fan, she'll watch. She's like kind of even dragged me to see some superhero movies, which I wasn't all that keen to watch. And some of them were actually like, "Hey, this is kind of good. Well, I'm glad you dragged me." But she says she hates Superman. because she feels he's a Mary Sue.
Okay.
And it also, it extends to other characters like Goku, for example. She thinks is a Mary Sue, so she can't stand him. Do you think Superman is a Mary Sue? And if so, why?
Well, it comes down to who's writing the character and what story, really.
Mm-hmm.
As a principle, I don't think Superman is a Mary Sue because it's not so much his powers that define the character, it's his actions. And he is known to make mistakes. He has a strong moral conscience. He has a great flaw, which is that he hides his entire life away from a woman he loves but does not pursue. So with Lois Lane, as soon as he meets her, he's like fallen in love with her, but he doesn't, say, "Hey, I'm Superman and I'm, want to go out on a date" or anything like that. He doesn't try to impress her in any way. He just has to sort of admire her from afar until he can slowly build up that trust and relationship with her. What makes Superman a great character and not a Mary Sue is the fact that he can be defeated.
Right.
Not just by like kryptonite, but by hurting the people that he can't save everyone at once. Like that's the best thing about him is that he cannot save everyone.
In a magic
like he's got physical weaknesses to kryptonite and magic, but the thing that really gets to him that he cannot do anything about is exemplified not just in the Richard Donner Superman film, where Pa Kent has a heart attack and he can't save him from that.
Right.
But also in an episode of Lois and Clark that you mentioned earlier, where there's a drive-by shooting and Superman wasn't there to stop it, and a kid is in critical condition, he might die, and Clark Kent is like horrified by this because he was basically blackmailed by Lex Luthor into saying like, you're gone. If you show up, I'm going to do this to the world.
Right.
And what ends up happening is that Lois Lane reminds him that it doesn't matter that he can't be everywhere at once. It's where he is able to show up is what counts and matters. And that's kind of the one thing that it makes Superman very interesting, is that he can't be everywhere at once. Because a true Mary Sue would be no character growth, which means that you'd never have a story like that with Superman.
Right.
Second would be he can't be harmed by anything, even if you were to attack other people, because he's so fast and so perfect that he can stop every single tragedy that occurs.
Exactly.
Which is not the case, because then he wouldn't have lasted as long as he has. So and the other part too is that he learns, he makes mistakes, he is at odds with characters like Lex Luthor and Brainiac and Mr. Mxyzptlk and Lobo and Parasite and all those guys. Like they can challenge him physically, but they also challenge him intellectually. And because it has those ebbs and flows, and granted, yes, he does succeed pretty much at the end of every story all the time, because you want a happy ending with your stories. He still undergoes a journey. He still learns a lesson. He still has a lesson to impart. He's also an example of that, of a role model type character, something that we would strive to be in behavior, even though we can never be that in strength. And that's kind of what allows him to be not a Mary Sue, because he's not perfect. He has lost fights. He's been killed. And granted, he comes back, but he's been killed. There was a time, especially in the early 70s, where they were making up more powers for Superman to the point where he literally was on the line of Mary Sue, or he could blow out a star right before it would went supernova.
Right.
So like that's like when they're like, okay, yeah, we're making his powers dictate the character, and when you do that, you end up removing what makes the character a character. I like the fact that even once he reveals his identity to Lois Lane, there are issues where she still rejects him. She doesn't want to be in a relationship with him. Like a Mary Sue that doesn't face that.
Right. No.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It is like I've been having a tough time trying to think of like a good explanation, like good reasons to kind of just like. But I have to tell you, so I'm listening to you for ammunition. That's I figure have someone smarter than me come up with a good reason why to express it, and then I'll be like, well, actually, honey, he's not quite a Mary Sue because da, 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 da. So that I can cut because like
Well, I'm definitely not that smart of a person, but I
no
have
no
spent a lot of time thinking about these types of things because
you aren't you all right. You may not be able to calculate a rocket ship, but you can be able to defend Superman's Mary Sudom. So I just take the win, man. Just take the win.
oh yeah, I'll take it. I mean, it's a character I've read a lot
No,
about for
no.
years. I've come up with my own stories for the character, and because you just want to like challenge them the best they can. Even with like Man of Steel, like within that entire movie, I was like, why is well, number one, he breaks Zod's neck. Um, Aside
Yeah,
from that fact being like crazy, the fact he moves the head in the direction that's towards the family, so his heat vision should have vaporized those people. Um,
yeah,
the other part too is that he learns in the movie that his powers are bestowed upon him through the sun's rays,
right,
and all I can think of is like, well, a normal Superman story, if Zod were still there and he was doing this, Superman would just fly Zod to the dark side of the moon and hold him there until his solar energy depleted because Superman's got 30 years and Zod's got like 30 hours. And
right.
so he'd be eventually be
You can
trapped on the
outlast
moon.
them.
You can outlast him. You can trap him on the moon.
Yeah,
Then Superman can fly back, make a lead coffin, go back to the moon, throw him in there, take him back to Earth, put him underground where he can't get any sunlight, and be in a prison for however long. And boom, you're done. You don't have to compromise the integrity of Superman killing his enemy. And the reason heroes don't kill enemies is kind of the same thing what we're going through right now with the police. Like you do that, people are going to respond poorly. And on
yeah.
top of that, it's very evil for the public to ask one individual to be judge, jury, and executioner
I
because
will.
they're
Yeah,
because they're putting the burden on the hero as opposed to taking the responsibility of the legal system, which every individual is to contribute to. That's why you have a judge. That's why you have a court, a trial of by your peers, and then
yeah,
the
yeah.
sentencing. Because if you put onto that one person, the other part too is they either are guilt ridden by it and they end up becoming unable to function, or they relish it, and then they can conflate what action can lead to the same result by any means. They can always argue a point to justify another execution. That's why you don't have Batman kill. That's why you don't have Superman kill. My first viewing of Superman 2 was on television, and at the very end, it's Zod, Non, and Ursa being taken away by the North Pole police. So you're like, oh, they're alive. Okay. So he didn't kill them.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm fine with that. And then you have all these other people saying, well, no, he kills. It's like, and when he's in poorly written stories, yeah, he kills. But what makes Superman Superman is he doesn't have to become a killer to be a hero.
Right. Well, so I'm glad. Oh, so you mentioned 2 points that I'm kind of very. So like I agree with like so when I was watching Man of Steel, I at first I did not like him killing Zod, but I thought how he handled it, how his reaction of just being guilt ridden over it was accurate, or at
Yeah.
least accurate as I understand it. And like when I heard people, when I heard what's his name, Goyer, was it?
Oh,
I think
David
it was,
Descoyer. Yeah.
yeah, Goyer, saying that like, oh well, kind of do his like whole like, well, he needs to, you need to build that foundation of like why he doesn't kill. And so I'm kind of like, all right, fine. But that's that's one of those things that kind of killed Batman versus Superman with me, where I was like, I know I know, directing's all about making choices, but Zack Snyder, you made a bad choice with him killing the terrorist guy,
Yeah. Well, not
like
only
just
that,
flying
like
into him
I don't
like
know
that.
about you or anyone else, but
No, go ahead.
I've never needed to kill someone to understand that killing is wrong and that I should not do it. I mean,
I
like that's
no, no, no. Okay, okay. Don't get me wrong.
like
Don't get
that's
me wrong.
David
I'm not
Escoyer's
like
argument. Really, is like he had to kill in order to understand the value of life, and I'm like, David Escoyer is not a very good writer, anyways. He got very lucky because he worked on Dark City, and he was able to parlay that into Blade
yeah,
and just kind of work his way up. And he was the only writer in Hollywood at the time that knew anything about comic books, so he was sought
yeah,
after a lot.
yeah. I mean, because like the I agree. Like I would have been like so with like in regards to the the Superman with like the Man of Steel and like kind of killing the not killing the terrorist. If you did that, I would have been fine because it's like, okay, fine, I see your premise is built up. I the one statement that I am kind of not, I'm kind of like on is the idea of Batman and killing.
Yes.
Because Batman has killed before in several times in the comics.
Yep.
But the way I've always viewed how Batman kills is he works like it's like special forces. They have, because of what they're doing is a tactical thing to, because of what they're doing is like a mission specific tactical thing, they have a certain leadway with killing. I don't agree with it, but I'm saying it's like that's their thing. Because when you look at when you look at like the 1989 Batman, is they mold him in they put him in the same mold as like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando and Sylvester Stallone in Cobra.
Yep.
And so it's like I understand that decision in that respect. But also to going back is like going back as well. I'm kind of defending it now, like with the example for like with Ben Affleck's Batman, is like one is like, because I've heard a lot of people like, well, wait a minute, special forces people are allowed to kill, and they're allowed to they're given, because they're like the protect like Julius Caesar with the protector at the gate. They're allowed to they're allowed for this limited function to be judge, jury, and executioner. To me, that seems like that's the to me that seems kind of like that's the explanation, even though I know for a fact they're just trying to because they're putting it in the mold of an action movie. But
the other thing about the special forces and the Julius Caesar is that it's the permission to kill a foreign invasion or a foreign threat. It's not domestic, and Batman is very much of the domestic.
Well, no, because if you look at it, the Red Triangle Circus Gang and Joker's Goons was very much a domestic terrorist organization. They were very much invaders. They very much focused like an invading force, story wise. Yeah, they were a gang, but they were basically like the Red Triangle Circus Gang was not really so much a gang as in like the Crips.
They weren't stealing anything. They were just causing havoc.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They were pillage and plundering. They were raping. They were basically doing the raping, pillaging, and plundering stuff.
But that was all a distraction to kidnap Max Schreck.
No, yeah, exactly. But that was the I agree. Yes, but they functioned like that. I'll be honest. I think the best in premise wise, the best version of Batman is the Adam West.
Yes.
The best, because like in that one, in like the pilot, they're like, well, they're basically, it's like in like, especially in the first few episodes, but in the pilot especially, they're like, well, these are he's basically like he's a deputized consultant to the police force who only deals with the supervillains, the muggers and stuff. That's your standard, beat cop. And I think that aspect of Batman makes not only makes the most sense, but it seems the most credible.
Because he's a duly deputized law enforcement officer. He's not paid by the police, but he's requested. He's requested to help. Through the bat phone and the bat signal, and
he works on a consulting basis.
Yes,
and that's I think that's like the best. That seems to be kind of like the best version of Batman. In that respect,
the most comic accurate. I mean, if you take out some of the jokes, the perspective that Batman says out loud to Commissioner Gordon or Robin or anything, you could just make that all inner monologue to Batman and put it into a comic and it would be indistinguishable from some of the better works of the 70s, because
Absolutely.
that's how pure Batman is. The other part, which is a lot of writers seem to forget,
even 30s and 40s, because like in the Two-Face, in the debut of Two-Face one, he was, you know, Batman was doing charity work as kind of like a consultant for the police.
yeah.
So,
but here's another interesting fact about Batman, and that a lot of writers, when they write the character in the comics or in the media, they don't pay as much attention to, is that Batman's father was a surgeon. So his job was to save lives. And one of the interesting aspects about Batman, and I think Bill Finger and Julie Schwartz and Danny O'Neill took this into account, is that Batman's tactic when he's fighting crime is surgical. It's very precise. It's very careful. It's well thought out of. It's understanding context. But other writers take that as militaristic, which is not the case, because one of the interesting things that developed as Batman's character grew is that he doesn't like guns, and therefore he wouldn't treat his crusade, like a militaristic operation, because then he would be conflating himself with the people he's fighting against. So he comes at it from a surgical side, where the bad guys come at it from more like an aggressive or a militaristic type of side, especially where they have the gangs and the guns and all that other stuff.
but doesn't like, that's one thing with the gun Batman's gun policy that I've always found in just about every iteration of Batman. Well, not, I shouldn't say every, because I don't think in Adam West.
No, Adam West doesn't like guns either.
What I'm saying, well, no, I mean like the fact he uses artillery.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I think in just about, like, I think even in the well, I don't know about. It's been a long time since I saw.
And all the live action films, aside from the Adam West stuff, yeah, Batman has had guns and missiles and rockets. And
well, yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean,
military
like,
weapons. Yeah.
Well, like, yeah, he had military weapons. And I think the gun that he was going to use against Doomsday in Batman vs Superman, though, was like more like the ultimate nullifier type thing, where it's like it's a gun-shaped thing and it works like it's a gun. It's a gun in mechanics, but it's not actually a gun. But I mean, like, yeah, I understand. You know, I understood why people were kind of. But
That's the Frank Miller influence. Actually, Frank Miller is a child of military parents, and he's the one that I can think of that really brought in the whole military war on crime soldier mentality to Batman, which has had, in my opinion, only a positive influence on the Dark Knight Returns comic book miniseries, but a negative impact on the character since. And that's just because the one thing that made Batman very interesting is he was committed to his quest, but he was never obsessed. And Frank Miller's like, no, let's make him obsessed, and then let's make him militaristic, and then let's make Gotham full of like the most seediest people, but everywhere in Gotham, to the point where you're like, well, why are people still living
exactly
here,
it's like
right?
it's like Detroit's even safer than Gotham.
Yeah. And then as the decades go on and kids are reading comic books, but they're not going further before the Frank Miller period, they're now writing stories where Joker cuts off his face, where you've got the Court of Owls as this Illuminati type thing, but for some reason there's not an internal fight over who gets to rule it, because anyone who knows like a cultist aspect of that thing, it can't sustain itself, because whoever's at the top spends more time trying to stay alive and ahead of everyone that's trying to take his or her position than the people below. So it's really like the middle people get to manipulate stuff, but even then they get replaced because the people below them want to do it, and eventually it just eats itself.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out a way around that.
I'll be honest, is like of some of the like the major Batman stories, I have not read yet Court of Owls, and I haven't read Dark Knight Returns because it was Miller. But I did read Batman Year One, and I did like Batman Year One, but I don't like. I think like Batman Year One was good, but it was Batman. It was like one of those things where it's like, oh great, the Frank Miller thing with like prostitutes again. And it's like, oh great, Frank Miller's thing with Thermite. Okay, great. But at the same time, it was like he happened to write a pretty good story.
he did write a pretty good story. I would say the worst
But it's
part
a
about
crappy Batman story.
the worst part about Batman Year One was Jim Gordon cheating on his pregnant wife with Sarah Ensign, and part of me thinks that's just Frank Miller trying to justify his own unfaithful actions to his wife. Because it's like you take a character who is the integrity of the law that allows for another character like Batman to operate in a city because he knows he has no other choice, and you decide to corrupt his moral values by doing something pretty horrific. Even though it was interesting, it's like, yeah, you're this is not really the character you tell that type of story with.
Well, the thing that was confusing with me was is because I was keep trying to figure out, okay, where does Babs, Batgirl fit in, because Batgirl's his wife, and it's like, and the thing is like, oh, I have a son with this, and it's like, oh wait, what the fuck? And then it's like, so then basically that means in all the other Batman stories, you just basically like, fuck this guy. It's like that's
there's a lot of confusion with Batgirl for many years. Like, is she actually Jim Gordon's niece that he's taking care of, or was he a daughter from another marriage?
Yeah.
They don't really. They haven't. I think they finally solidified it, but I think they did in a speedy way.
They did in the. When's the last time I read the Batman comics? Late 2000, I think late 2000s. They did, where it was basically, it's like the son was just basically like a black sheep, and so they were like, fuck this guy. And
I do know they made Jim Jr. crazy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, Jim Jr. was like the bastard. It was like he was basically like the bastard. He was basically like the black sheep, I should say. And then Barbara, I think he had Barbara from Sarah Essen or maybe another person, and that's how come Barbara Gordon's his daughter. That's the last time I read the recent Batman comics. That was the storyline. Just like that was more or less like what the storyline was, and I was just kind of like, not. Don't get me wrong, I love comic books, but I could list off the single points of like what got me to not want to read comics anymore in certain parts, and. It's like there's like certain things, there's like certain comics issues where it's like nope, I'm done.
Yeah, I dropped out around the Bruce Wayne murderer, Bruce Wayne fugitive storyline.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, that one's dumb. That one was dumb because it's like that one. It's like the fact that okay. So, right, if all these like people, like for example, Ra's al Ghul and like Riddler figuring out that he's fucking, Bruce Wayne's fucking Batman, even though he's got like the craziest tech, he's got more tech than he's got tech that a guy in Silicon Valley would like just, cream over.
Yeah.
Aside from that obvious thing, it's like, how could you not figure out that Bruce Wayne is Batman after that? Because it's like, if you're holding him, it's like, are you saying there's that much incompetence in the it's like, if there's that much incompetence in the GCPD, then why does Jim Gordon still have a job? Because he would have gotten his ass booted out because the people would have been pissed.
No, you make a very good point. One of the things that I felt was a big misstep with the direction of Batman comics was the fact that they were giving Batman all this really unique and advanced tech, and he was relying more on the technology and the computers than his own deductive skills. And what's really awesome about Batman is how much he just knows through memory and experience, and how much he's able to do stuff on the fly, as opposed to like having augmented reality holograms around him, or like
exactly. I mean, well, like that, like there's certain. I'm gonna probably piss you off again.
Piss me off. You haven't pissed me off yet.
No. So there's certain things where it's like my personal, like if you're asking me, like, Willie, what is your definition of like, what are the things that you definitely consider is like, this is Batman, this is Superman, this is like for one thing, I don't like that Superman can fly. I love the fact that, you know, leaps tall buildings in a single bound. I love, and I've heard, because the first iteration of Superman that I fell in love with was the Fleischer, uh, Superman cartoons. Take care, Toxic Man Flu. You have a good one. Because my mom had a couple of VHSs of a couple episodes on each one, and I freaking loved it. Like, I was interested in watching Batman the Animated Series because it looked like the Fleischer Superman cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
That's what made me love it, is because it looked like that, because I love those cartoons. Like, so, but I understand that, you know, people, but with that said, though, even though that's my personal thing, if I were going to write for Superman, of course he'd fly, because that's what people would expect.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's kind of the thing with Batman. It's like, absolutely right. Batman would not be so tech savvy, you know, to be so tech heavy, because it's a ridiculous, it's like the ridiculous, it outs him as Bruce Wayne so easily.
It could, or at least any other billionaire within the tri-state area. Like,
exactly. Well, I mean, because like, you look at this, right? You could, if you're even just like a semi-competent thug, you could be like, okay, well, Batman's in really good shape, and he's got obviously a ton of money. So, all right, let me figure out like who is super athletic, and then super, and then super wealthy. And then, okay, you look into some of them some more, and it's like, oh, okay, well, wait, Bruce Wayne has like had this really tragic backstory that everyone freaking knows, and he was gone for a long time. It's kind of like, I'm surprised that the cops don't figure that out. let alone like Penguin or Riddler. Well, I mean, Riddler technically did like later, but I mean, like, you understand what I'm saying? It's like,
well, yeah. I mean, the one thing, the one thing that is interesting about Bruce Wayne is how much disinformation he puts out for who could Batman be. The other part too is that he spends a lot of time not advertising his athletic body and his own persona. But yeah, a good investigator would definitely question Bruce Wayne, try and get an alibi and all that type of stuff. And they did play a little bit with that in Batman Year One, and there's some other stories out there that do play with it.
That's one of the reasons why I liked Batman Year One, was because they actually addressed that.
Yeah,
because
and they do a pretty good type of thing where they play on Bruce Wayne being a little bit of a playboy buffoon, an alcoholic.
Well,
it goes a little too ham-fisted, but yeah, I mean, it's there.
I'll be honest. That's one thing I've always kind of hated about the Bruce Wayne thing, is the idea that, like, so one of the few things I will say that the Christian Bale, the Dark Knight trilogy did right with Bruce Wayne Batman, was they let Lucius Fox in on the secret. Because one of the things I've always, like, when I see in the cartoons and stuff, was like, well, wait a minute. If Lucius Fox is basically running Wayne Enterprises, and, you know, if Lucius Fox is supposed to be running Wayne Enterprises, and he's supposed to be running it with Bruce Wayne, because it's not like, you know, because he's not like a shareholder, he's the owner. So it'd be like, you know, he'd be like the George Lucas. It'd be like pre-Disney buyout, you know.
Yeah, George Lucas and Rick McCallum.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like if George Lucas decided to, like, you know, peace out and just let Rick McCallum run the entire Lucasfilm. That wouldn't work. You know, he would. It's like, because then after a while, McCallum would be like, wait, why am I having to report to this idiot, this lazy bum? And so that's one thing with the play. Like, that's one thing I liked about Batman the Animated Series, was they actually showed him he actually was a competent businessman. And that's why one of the things I liked about with Batman Returns is they showed him actually as a competent city leader.
Yes.
Like that's one thing. It's like I hate with the lazy playboy is because no one's because you can like one thing I always argued with is like with like Michael, especially with like Michael Keaton being Batman, is that okay? You look at there's a lot of billionaires in the Silicon Valley where I live. So, and I say this not to brag because I'm broke as fuck. I say this is like because like I've seen these guys. I've seen Zuckerberg show up on the news. I've seen the guy who runs who used to, I don't know if he still runs it, but the guy who ran Sun Microsystems
Mm-hmm.
because he was like jet setting playboy, but he was homely as hell. And it's like, and the thing was that I, it's like that makes it would make perfect sense if he was Batman because he is not someone who is in the public eye as much as they always say Bruce Wayne is.
Mm-hmm.
They basically like one of the few reasons why I kind of liked the casting of Ben Affleck as Batman was it would make sense of why a pretty boy like Ben Affleck would need to dress up as a bat in order to terrorize criminals. Because no, it's like if it was Ben Affleck, just Ben Affleck in like a mask or something like that, they'd just scoff at him because he'd be a pretty boy. So that's why it's like that's why I always bought like that's why I never liked the idea of him being like some ultra super lazy playboy, like ultra super hot lazy playboy. It's like no, it's Batman needs. No, sorry.
Bruce Wayne works best when he physically, like in his face and whatnot, is a very unassuming person.
Yeah.
Because that better works for his secret identity because there is a connotation that the people that save us are like the best looking people around type of thing. It's just the case. But you want to make him kind of, handsome enough, but not to the point where he's a supermodel because then you have too many people looking at him.
Yeah, but I mean, also too, it's like one of those things where it's like if you're rich, it's like most likely you're gonna have women who are gonna want your dick.
Yeah,
so
they're gonna want you for the money.
Yeah, exactly. The idea that you're a playboy is like the idea that you're freaking rich. It's like, well, of course you're gonna get women throwing themselves at you because you have a shit ton of money.
Yes.
And so it's like that's more or less kind of what I mean with like the whole like because yeah, you're right. It's like if you look like a supermodel. You're going to obviously be way too pretty to where no one's going to be scared of you. They're just going to like, I can get my ass kicked by I can't believe I said Ashton. I can't believe the first thought that my name was Ashton Kutcher. Oh, I could get my ass beat by Henry Cavill. And I'd probably, Twilight guy.
Robert Pattinson?
Robert Pattinson. I could get my ass thrashed by Robert Pattinson, but I would be laughing my fucking head off the entire time because oh, hey, bruised a rib. It's like, ow, that hurts like hell. But dude, it's like, I can't believe I got my bruised by this little putz. I wouldn't be scared of him. I'd be more kicking myself for getting my ass kicked by him. But it's like, I wouldn't take him seriously. That's my point. It's like, that's why I don't think you need a pretty boy it's like a pretty boy Batman. It's like, that's the only thing I can see of why you would have a pretty boy Batman is someone who's trying to disguise the fact that he is a pretty boy. But at the same time, it's like having Bruce Wayne be a pretty boy just seems kind of like a dumb idea in the first place.
Well, it seems then it's also getting him closer to the point of like a Mary Sue him. Like, oh, he's great looking, he has a great body, and he's a superhero. It's like, okay, you're giving us a bunch, but the thing is that the mass populace, like the groupthink idea, is that the good-looking guy is obviously going to be the hero, and I mean, like the story of the Hunchback of Notre Dame kind of tells you the opposite is true.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what you want to do is like Adam West, handsome guy, not gorgeous supermodel, but he can play that unassuming type of character. Same with Michael Keaton, unassuming type of character. George Clooney, a little bit too handsome, but he did a fairly decent Bruce Wayne, not a
Yeah.
great Batman.
Yeah.
Christian Bale, not gorgeous, but you could easily see him more as a Batman type out of the mask than you could in it because of the way that he was presented.
See, that was one of the
Because you
things
look at him
that
and you're like, yeah, that's a guy that I could see put on a mask and fight
no,
crime, and
that was I didn't
even
think
though
that
he's
at
like
all.
well,
I
he
didn't
just
think
felt
that
like
at
a very obvious casting choice. Like that's the
eh,
thing.
well, because like
Like
my
not the
problem.
best casting choice, but a very obvious one.
One of my pet peeves with Christian Bale as Batman, another one of them, was the fact is that I can't buy. Why would he need to dress up as a bat? Because like I had this discussion with my brother, who's a huge comic book fan as well. It's like look, he's already intimidating by himself. You know, it's like yeah, all right, fine. He may present him. You know, he may do like the he may act as a bit of a putz, but you know what? If I was going to get in a fight with him, he could, he has that intense look, like even in like some of his and when he's like not serious, that it's just kind of looks intimidating. So like, why on earth would he need to dress up as that look of Batman? It's like I could buy he would dress up as like the Ninja Daredevil in the Daredevil Netflix series, but I wouldn't buy why he would dress up as Batman. And it's like that to me. It's like that he was too pretty, and he was too like muscular, intimidating to where it's like.
Well, he
I mean,
should have been a Two-Face because that's more within his range.
yeah. And Culture Casino puts in here is like, yeah, he has to be aloof, and it's like, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, it's like he needs to be more than just aloof, because here's like the common, like that's one of the reasons why a lot of people loved Christopher Reeve's take on Superman, was because he changed his entire mannerisms in order to appear more
Less
like
connected
a
to a
cuck.
Superman character, yeah.
Yeah. Because like if you look at it, right, when like how they viewed mild mannered and stuff, it's like Clark Kent's kind of supposed to be a cuck, but not supposed to be too much of a cuck to where you can't buy that he would be considered a star reporter.
Yeah.
So
He's supposed to be a slave to his own humility. So like that's the type of thing where
exactly, yeah, like
he's there to observe and report. He's not going to get involved. Where Lois is there to get involved and report. And yeah, that's the dynamic.
There's a few versions of Clark Kent I like, where it's basically like he writes more of the fluff pieces, like the touchy feely fluff pieces, whereas Lois is like the Woodward and Bernstein, like investigative reporter type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that I'll be honest, I personally like that dynamic. Lois and Clark and Superman the Animated Series. That's kind of how they kind of played that off, and it's like that made sense, where he doesn't have to be a cuck. He's just a bit, he doesn't have to be a complete cuck, but he's a bit like, like the easygoing passive guy,
So Deborah Joy Levine, who is the creator of Lois and Clark,
yes.
She got assigned to do the show because she's very good with dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
But after a couple of weeks trying to work on the pilot, she's like, I can't do this. Can I just write it as a romantic comedy? And the execs at Warner Brothers said, hey, that's a good idea because no one's done that with Superman yet. So go for it. And so she did. And her mandate was that Clark Kent is the man and Superman is what he can do. And Clark Kent is not going to be a pushover, but he's going to be very polite with regards to how Lois treats him. Like he's going to get under her skin because that's part of the fun of flirtation.
Right.
But he's also not going to be, a Superman type overbearing on her. And Lois, every time Lois tries to be overbearing on Clark, he's going to be able to get a couple of little jabs in there because any person that's got some self-confidence would do that, but he's doing it just because he's having fun with it. He's not doing it out of a retaliation. And what ended up happening, which was actually really interesting, is that it had a really profound profound take on the Superman as a character. And what ended up happening is that through those actions, Deborah Joy Levine said, "Hey, wouldn't it be funny if I had Lois remark about how perfect Superman is, but say it to Clark because that's what she sees in Clark, but not make the distinction because it's the costume and the powers that are blinding her from the actual character." So Clark ends up being both Superman and Clark at the same time, but the presentation of Superman is more of a job and more of a responsibility, but the core value is still within Clark, and he's still able to be human from Lois's perspective, to the point where that's why she kind of admires and loves Clark Kent, is because he's the real deal and Superman is not.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the best thing you could do for a character like Superman. It's been teased about throughout the comics prior to that and a little bit afterwards, but it's never been done so eloquently. And sadly, because Deborah Joy Levine was kind of removed from the show after the first season, the show kind of gets off the rails from that dynamic.
Oh man, because
it changes quite drastically. But I really liked that first season a lot. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Definitely a good model to base off and build a foundation for the character in the future.
Right. And like I didn't see very much of the show when it came out at the time, but like I was watching it because like I was binge watching it like a couple weeks ago on DC Online.
Yep.
And like I to be honest, it's like as a superhero, it's like it's kind of like how what Nerdrotic said, you know, the whole like, oh, walking in hallways and talking your feelings. And
Yeah.
it's like it's like I can understand where like Smallville to now with like Black Lightning and Arrow and Flash and stuff kind of went from there, because that's basically what the show did really great that in that first season was that part, the walking in hallways and talking about feelings part. It's like the
the conflict was real. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the Superman-y stuff wasn't as good.
No.
But it's like, but don't get me wrong, I love that version. Like I love Dean Cain as Superman, and I when I saw even a few episodes, I loved Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher as their prospective characters, and I thought they were like spot on. But it's like an action show. All right, fine. It's not that great of an action show, but as a drama, as a romantic, as a drama that happens to be in a superhero set dressing, it's great. Just like it's kind of like how Batman's a comedy, but it's in a superhero set dressing.
Yes. And to your point, like the Lois and Clark make sure that every conversation they have has relevance to the overall plot of the story and to how the characters develop.
Yes.
The conflict is real. The conflict may be episodic, but it's there. Whereas when you have Smallville and the Berlanti Arrowverse and all that stuff, the conflict is superficial. It's not real. It's repeating the same mistakes over and over again. It's derivative.
Yeah.
It's basically like, what is the formula for Arrow? Arrow does a stupid mistake, then David Ramsey comes in and tells them that he's doing a stupid mistake. Then they get into an argument, and then Arrow ends up saying, "Okay, we're going to suit up and work together." And they listen to David Ramsey, and then they complete their mission. It's like wash, rinse, repeat sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas there's a story in episode in Lois and Clark where they're following up an actual article that they're writing. So you have a guy who was murdered, but the police are saying he committed suicide. So it's like, well, let's uncover the truth, and how does this relate to to what we're doing here?
Right. It was vague enough to where you can make it as like there's certain things you can set as a formula, but not be too repetitive.
Yes.
Because like, yeah, I agree with you. With like part of the reason why I stopped trying to see Flash and Supergirl and stuff all that much was just I saw the same. They were making it too standardized, and it's like while I get that it makes sense in a business aspect, it doesn't work that well in a story aspect. And so
also the team aspect for an individual superhero doesn't also work. So Lois and Clark, it was a partnership, but Superman was pretty much on his own. Lois would give him some ideas, or sometimes they would meet another character that would give him an idea to solve a problem. But it was really Superman doing it kind of on his own with some stakes. And Lois had her own problem that she was solving, and she had to do it on her own without Superman's help to save the day, what have you. And that's what made it really interesting. But once you get to Greg Berlanti, or actually the grandfather of the founding fathers of that aspect was Smallville, Michael Goh and Miles Miller.
Yeah.
You have Clark Kent's the muscle. The blonde girl is the brains.
Chloe Sullivan.
Chloe Sullivan's the brains, and then you get one of the other characters, who's like not Lex Luthor, but they brought in Oliver Queen, so he's now the money. You got
Lex Luthor was, and then Oliver Queen was the money.
You had they had Pete Ross in there, who was like the best friend who knew the secret and was burdened by it. And then you had Lana Lang, who was just there because she was in Smallville at the same time Clark Kent was. Like, there's no reason for her to be there.
I liked going to Smallville.
Yes,
I actually liked I really liked season 1 through 5. Like, I think that's actually season 4 was kind of meh, but I mean, I liked the premise, the premise of how the show worked, where it was basically, is like they used the kryptonite was the MacGuffin that would was basically the radiation, and if it was a Stan Lee thing, a Stan Lee book. To power them, and what their power was basically kind of an offshoot of them as a character, whether it was like the guy who would freeze people by touch, being a cold bastard who was trying to who was just trying to be a sleazy fucker, to the episode with what's her name? I used to know this. Lois Lane in Man of Steel.
Oh, Amy Adams.
Thank you, Amy Adams. Where she was like this fat girl who used the kryptonite to get herself thin, but now she craves fat from it's like a vampire.
She had needed to eat so many more calories in order to stay alive, otherwise she'd wither away.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I liked that, and it's up until the part where season 5, if the fact that by the end of season 5. He was not wearing this. He was not Superman. Was bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's and as the seasons progressed, it was all right, now come on. All right, now come on. And while it was annoying as hell, but understandable, which is dumb. I'm sorry. They should have. Sorry, I know why. I know the politics behind it, but at the same time, it's no, that's fucking stupid. You should have made the deal with Fox earlier to get Batman on there.
Yeah, they repeated that exact same mistake with the Arrowverse. I mean,
oh yeah, yeah. I couldn't get into Arrowverse. I couldn't get into Arrow because when I kept watching it, I'm it'd be great if it was Batman.
Yeah,
that'd be great. I kept watching it. I was so.
They were going to give the Green Arrow character body armor very similar to what Batman wore in Batman Begins and all that stuff in the script, but they opted out of it because it was too expensive and too time consuming to put on.
Yeah,
for a TV show. Yeah,
it is. That pissed me off to no end at the fact that it was basically it's even though everyone understood the thing of, well, there's a rights issue. It is. Can I ask you a question about Hollywood?
Sure.
Why is it that when they get asked things hey, can we have, say, Batman in Smallville, or can we have Batman in the Arrowverse?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't they say, well, it's a rights issue? Why can't they just straight up just be upfront with people and just be well, if and just say it's a rights issue, or say, for example, with Green Lantern, if it was too expensive to do it, it's well, it's out of our, it's a little too expensive to do the character justice. It's why can't they say that?
Well, they want people to speculate and hope that that character will be in the show because they'll at least give them ratings and allow them to sell it to foreign markets for much more than what it's actually worth.
Oh, okay.
The other part
So
is that even though Warner Brothers owns DC and then AT&T owns Warner Brothers, whatnot, there are still other companies within Warner Brothers that has the rights or contracts to characters to do their own project.
right, like
And in some legal regards, they won't release. They have it exclusively. So it's like, oh, we have the film rights for feature films for Batman, and there's the TV rights are encompassed with that.
Yeah. I mean, like just basically, I understood that part, and like, because I know, you ever heard of Movie Bob?
Oh yeah, I've heard of him.
Long
He's a weird guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's a putz, but he did have some videos that were where he made good points, and one of the things was like, DC, why aren't you doing a thing like Marvel Cinematic Universe? You actually own the rights to all your characters. Kind of, but it's like I understood that from like me. I understood that through my own personal learning that of the whole thing with like, exclusivity rights and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, okay, but at the same time, I don't. It still doesn't make sense to me about why can't you just be like, if they're saying like, well, why can't we have Wonder Woman? Why can't they just go, well, it's a rights issue, or and just keep it vague, keep it vaguely specific, so where they can. But then you brought up the point where it's like, oh, okay, so that they can try and sell it for more money, and that kind of, I'll be honest, that kind of sucks. That's
the reason why like terrible shows last longer than they should, especially on the network side of things, because they can sell them to affiliates overseas. So they can sell them to China, they can sell them to India, all the European countries, Eastern and Western European countries for a lot of money, and that money can be used to finance the show for more seasons.
Right.
Because budgets don't grow much. Yeah, budgets don't really increase as a show continues on from season to season. Rarely do they do.
Oh, I thought they do mainly for. I thought I'm surprised because I actually thought because from what I understood was the thing was like when you create your set, it's like okay, after you get your show picked up from pilot, a lot of the sets and stuff is there's a certain amount of diminishing returns. So that basically will pay for itself for a while.
Oh,
so
and
then
ties
you can put your budget up. You can put your budget towards other parts in kind of like either raising the stakes, getting a very special guest star, paying your actors more.
Well, that can work in a show that can have what's called bottle episodes.
Right.
Sadly, there's not a whole lot of network TV shows, especially in the hour-long format these days, that can do bottle episodes. I think Orville is probably the only one that can really do it. Because they can't. NCIS does have to go on location. Those can be expensive.
No. I actually no. I need to stop you there.
That's okay.
Because there's in a few times in the commentaries for the past season's DVDs, they're like, oh yeah, we had to do a bottle episode, and like that's why in that show they do the bit where they just stop the elevator and they use it as a expository dump.
Yeah,
because it was so that they can do more bottle episodes. So then and just try to cut down how much they're on location. Because like if you look at NCIS, there's actually like there's very little per episode where they're out of the out.
I think they try to only have 2 sequences where they're on the location for the actual investigation, and then another one for like a follow up, and then the rest is all like at the HQ or the lab.
Yeah, exactly. And so like they do a lot of bottle episodes. They actually do have a lot of bottle episodes, which is part of the reason why that when CBS was not doing a lot of money, they were able to like run NCIS infinitum.
Well, not only that, take a look at NCIS conversely with a show like Arrow. One thing that you'll notice is that NCIS has a very lived-in background. There's lots of extras. There's lots of people moving around. With Arrow, as you get further along the seasons, you're seeing less people on the streets. You're seeing less communities. You're just seeing very intimate 3-4 actors in a whole episode. Yeah. The only thing you see lots of people are like stunt guys as goons, and it's really like 10 people and they just shoot it in a way to make it look like it's 20 or 30.
Yeah, which is what I'll be like. Yeah, and I'll be honest. Like for in all honesty, there's a certain amount of well, oh, you know what? I have another.
Go for it.
Well, no, because this is an interesting conversation, but it's like, but my ADHD will totally make me lose. Like by the time we're done this conversation, my question's gone. So I gotta ask. In Canada, do they have their own version of like studio backlots, like Universal Studios? Because so many, it seems like from what I understand from like different commentaries, so many of the same shows shoot in different in kind of like the same areas. Like from what I understand, stuff in Arrow, like some backgrounds in Arrow were also the same that they used in the show Psych. And
Yep.
so it's like, do they
there's
have
a couple of
backlots?
backlots is probably making it sound bigger than it actually is. There are warehouses, there are studio lots in Vancouver and Toronto that and also a new one in the Mississauga from CBS that they built that last year, that are defaults. So one thing that Canada has is they have a lot of tax credits, especially if you shoot in the city, which is very, very beneficial to productions. Warner Brothers has rents a lot of space in Vancouver. I think they have like a 20-year lease on the Kent farm that they use for Smallville or something like that, because they use it a lot.
I remember oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so like it's a lot. There's a lot of rental spaces in Vancouver. It's a big boost to the economy. Same thing with Toronto. Pinewood, Toronto is pretty big. They have their own artificial beach there.
You're shitting me.
No, it's there. It's because it's on this island that's not far away from the Toronto Airport Island, and they have a really big building. Some of it, every floor has its own massive set that they use. They have another building across the way that also has like default office sets and things that can be easily redressed and whatnot. The major building is where they construct the unique stuff. And
that sounds cool.
Yeah, and they rent it out pretty frequently. Not so much over the last few years because CBS has rented it out for their Star Trek Discovery show, which they have not really used it a whole lot in comparison, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, like like Warner Brothers, they'll rent out a couple of soundstage areas and sections of the city in Vancouver for X amount of weeks, and they will shoot as many productions as they can in those weeks, and they'll schedule them all. So like in 1 week they'll shoot somewhere in downtown Vancouver, and day 1 would be Arrow, day 2 would be a show like Psych, day 3 would be another show, what have you, and just for that entire week it'd be a different production over and over and over again, but either daytime or nighttime, doesn't matter. And they just get the most money out of that one rental, and then they'll spread out the costs across all the shows so that it pays for the time, and they'll end up saving a little bit of money so that they can afford either another special effect, or maybe a special high-profile guest star, or maybe they'll be able to use that money saved to tear down an old set and replace it with a new one to sort of make it a little bit more flashy. That type of stuff. So you will see a lot of familiar things. My favorite part is whenever they shoot stuff in New York, and if you pay attention to the roads, you can see tracks in the roads for like a streetcar. And if you see that, you're most likely looking at Toronto that they're shooting in.
Yeah.
Because the whole city has very much been redesigned to look it's very template type of city. You see cities like Toronto in Germany and Austria, in Japan, and in some parts of England. It's very, very familiar, and we actually have some stuff that hasn't changed in the last 70 years, so you can make it look like a period piece pretty easily. So that's what they do. That's when you go way, way out into the east end of the city. So yeah,
the Canadian tourism board. No, I'm kidding.
Oh yeah, like for instance,
No.
Resident Evil.
No, no,
One
no,
of the
no, no.
Resident Evils was shot entirely in Toronto, and it's supposed to be like Raccoon Town, but it's like it's clearly Toronto. And on top of that, in the first season, second season, I think, of Star Trek: The Next Generation, they use the mayor's office, or like basically the political office of downtown Toronto, in an episode with the alien probe that rewrites all the software in the Enterprise, and Data gets like a virus,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to walk through the gate. I think it's called the the O'Connors or something. No,
I'm sorry, I was just making a joke. That's all.
yeah, but that's like
We're
it's
talking
funny.
so
They
much about
shoot all that stuff
Canada.
in
Yeah.
Canada.
Okay. All right. So, because it's getting all right. It's getting it's getting toward that time.
Yep.
So even though I didn't get to ask all my questions, and I want you to come back, because one of the things I wanted to do with you was have a debate over the mystery box.
Sure.
Because with your mystery box video, I agreed but kind of disagreed with your point there.
Okay.
And I wanted to have a discussion about it, but that's like next time.
Yeah, sure.
But this question, I think this is a good question. You may, well, I'm being presumptuous, yes, but it's like you may even want to make a video off of this.
Okay.
All right. If you had to distill your views on the craft of storytelling to one movie, what would it be?
That's a good question. The craft of storytelling to one movie.
Mm-hmm.
Probably The Princess Bride.
How come?
It's cross-genre. It's clear and concise story. It has stakes. Has personal character. It's got wit. Every character is well-rounded. Has their own wants and goals. Even Fred Savage, as the kid, just listening to the story from Peter Falk, he doesn't want to listen to it at the first part, but he's like stuck in bed, so he's he can't do anything. He's kind of held hostage.
Right.
But the story kind of wins him over. I like the fact that Buttercup is marrying someone that she doesn't want to marry, but she's doing it because she has to for her family's sake. I like the fact that Carrie Elwes' character's coming back because of this, when he learns of such a thing. I like Andre the Giant's. He's just the guy that wants to, eat and get work. I like Inigo Montoya, who he's all about the vengeance, just trying to get the man that killed his father. I like how Christopher Guest is the guy that did kill his father, and he's got his own little skeevy stuff going on. All the characters are very well developed. They're very well rounded, and it follows the best axiom for screenwriting, which is simple plot, complex characters. So simple plot is basically rescue the princess from the evil dragon. And the complex characters is, let's make it Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Princess Leia, Darth Vader, and Grand Moff Tarkin. And
Did you say Grandma Tarkin?
Grand Moff Tarkin.
It's like Grand Moff, like, now
I would love to meet Grandma Tarkin. I'd love to see how she raised, her son, her grandson, and her son and her grandson. That would be awesome. Let's do a Star Wars story, Grandma Tarkin. You killed my grandson. I'm 300 years old.
Oh, give me my Werther's originals while I destroy Alderaan.
Yeah.
Okay. Script Doctor, I'm gonna try to choose my words very carefully. Thank you for coming, because I really enjoyed picking your brain and kind of button heads on stuff. I appreciated it. Thank you very much. I put a link to Script Doctor's channel in the description. So if any and everyone who hasn't subscribed or checked out his stuff, please do. I mean, by the way, I want to like put this on record because like when I was doing my research, I was just watching a bunch of videos. I was trying to watch videos where like I didn't watch the Star Trek Discovery ones because it's like, well, I haven't seen it, so I couldn't really have an opinion on.
Oh, you mean the Picard stuff?
Yeah, the Picard stuff. Sorry,
no worries.
The Picard.
No worries.
It's like, but I watched the Mandalorian stuff, and I was like, all right, yeah. And it's like I really and like the ones where it was like on J.J. Abrams with the mystery box and R2D2, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
So I wanted to kind of be on record that yes, you do know your stuff because.
I hope so.
Well, I mean,
there's so many people in Hollywood that don't. So you know. Like...
Well, no, well, like okay, so all right, not to brag,
sure.
I've been a writer, even though I took a few years off from being kind of giving up on a writer. I've been a writer for a very, very long time, writing a lot of different stuff. So, and I've learned, and I studied and learned stuff. I didn't take literature as in school because I was doing it at home. Mm-hmm. But while I have not read any of your work, from your commentary, you are the real deal. You are an excellent writer.
Oh, okay. I don't think I'm an excellent writer, but I appreciate the compliment, and I will happily take it.
Yeah, because all right, you may not know necessarily like how to execute. You may not know necessarily like it's like kind of like if you're playing a video game. You may not be able to time perfectly the Hadouken, but you know the buttons to push to make the Hadouken.
Sure. So yeah. Sure. Let's say that. Like, I mean.
Yeah.
I'm just very critical of my own work too. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of par for the course, and like. It's one of those things where if you're not a little, it's when it comes to writing, if you're not a little self-critical, then you're probably a hack. Because it's like, even like at my best, it's like, yeah, I can write, it's like, yeah, I'm a pretty good writer, but am I gonna actually be like, I'm the best? But I'm never gonna be like, I'm the best there is. No. Hell no, I am. No, it's like, it's like saying you're the strongest. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Most likely there's going to be someone stronger than you. Anyway, I'm rambling. And also to our lovely chat, thank you for your time and thank you for coming by and checking out this humble man monkey and keeping me off the streets and away from animal control. So thank you. I'm going to bid you. All right, guys, take care and have a good night.
Thank you very much for inviting me on tonight. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. Yes. That's a short answer. Because like a lot of times, like when like I hear you there's a few guests. So like I know a lot of times like Tom and Midnight's Edge, they're great people. Okay, I have no disparaging word, but at the same time, there's times when I kind of like I'd want to be on the panel just to interact and talk with the people in the panel, because it's like, yeah, I know they say, well, you can post stuff in the chat. It's like, yeah, but you're not gonna like I can't like ask you a bunch of questions and kind of engage you in that kind of thing as if like it's like person to person.
Yeah.
Chat, please forgive me. I'm not trying to belittle your contributions, and I am not. You guys are the audience, so I mean, I wouldn't have a show if you weren't there. So please do not think I think little of you. But like you and like Robert Burnett and Andre, I wish I can have on this show and just pick their brain, just like talk whatever thing and just kind of pick your brains, because it's like it sound like that skit, skit in the Saturday Night Live skit where Chris Farley, he's like, you go into interviewing stuff. It's like,
Oh,
hey,
where he does
that
his
cool
interviewing
thing?
show? Yeah.
Yeah. It's starting to sound like that. But anyway, take care, good sir. You have a nice night. Take care, chat. And stay healthy too, because we're still having a pandemic.
Stay healthy. Thanks so much.
And I hit the end broadcast. Yeah, and okay, there you go.